Morning, everyone. Sure. Anyone wants to take a seat? We got extra ones.
Jessica, Nikki, if you guys want to be like near front. Well, Sarah. The other attorneys. Yeah, thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. This is a case in which landlords deceived and cheated their tenants and then subjected them to miserable living conditions. At the center of the case is Westminster Management. It's a management company that ran 17 different housing complexes owned by 25 different owners, totaling about 9,000 units. The tenants were not wealthy people on the whole. Many struggled to pay the rent, keep food on the table, take care of their kids, keep everybody healthy. And Westminster used its vastly superior economic power to take advantage of it. Westminster deceived the tenants before they even moved in. It claimed the units were in good condition, and in most cases, when tenants came to look at the units, they were shown models. The models were clean, were freshly painted, they had appliances that were nice, that were new. But when the tenants packed up all their belongings and showed up on move-in day, they were given keys to units that were run down, units that were moldy, had plumbing leaks, had infestations of pests, and malfunctioning, in many cases, malfunctioning HVAC units. Once they were in, they couldn't afford to get out. Westminster took advantage of that. They charged illegal fees. The illegal fees started before many of them moved in. The application fees were illegal. And they charged illegal fees when they filed for eviction against their tenants. And they were prolific in filing eviction cases. I think their policy was that they filed an eviction case on the 6th day of the month if they hadn't received the rent by the 5th day of the month. So they were in court a lot, and they charged illegal fees in the evictions. They charged agent fees, just $12, but agent fees when there weren't any agents. Agent fees when they hadn't paid anybody anything. They charged $80 for writs that cost $50. They collected court costs that they weren't entitled to collect. They charged excessive late rent fees, and when the tenants moved out, they failed to return the interest on their security deposits. They failed to return any positive credit balances that the tenants had. The living conditions in these units were often just miserable. There were serial leaks. There were leaks in the roofs. There were leaks in the ceilings. There were leaks in the appliances, in the plumbing, in the air conditioning. And not surprisingly, because of the leaks, mold was rampant. There were infestations of mice, rats, roaches, bed bugs. There were, on too many occasions, lack of utilities. There was often no heat in the winter, no air conditioning in the summer. And I want to show you some of Westminster. Did we have the handouts of the? Yeah. Can I have one of those? And can we pass them around? That's
email.
Yeah. The email. But I mean,
yeah,
we pass. Oh, you all got them. Okay. I just want to read you. Read this email. And this is Westminster. These emails that I'm talking about here, and you'll see this is an email dated September 25th, 1918, and the property manager writes, "We desperately need your help at Commons at Whitemarsh. with the number of roof leaks that are still occurring due to the damage that was caused by the storm back in March. We continue to band-aid the work, and the residents are getting out of control. Rents are being placed in escrow. Residents stated they're getting petitions signed to get Baltimore County Housing involved, and that's the last thing we need. I'm receiving at least 30 complaints per day. Residents are coming in and screaming in the office. We have a large amount of drywall damage, and potential for mold is becoming an issue. Please help me ASAP on getting this work done. On getting this work done ASAP. So you will be interested to know that it took Westminster another 2 months before they addressed this problem. The problem started on March 2nd. They got on it, I think, sometime in November or December following that storm. In the packets that we handed out, there were a number of emails that are also Westminster's analysis of the situations. I want to read a couple in particular. This is the subject line on this email is mice. Another person called me today. She hears them in the walls, and we've been there several times doing seek and seals. This is one of the ones on the list that called corporate. She wants to move out now. She said that she now sees big ones in her kitchen. I'm so afraid it's worse than we think. Nothing is helping, and I'm so tired of getting calls from the same people. I can't let everyone move out. They want me to find another exterminator. This is the desperation of the staff at Westminster trying to talk about what's going on in the properties that they're trying to manage. If you look through these, there's one after another talking about the plumbing, talking about the mold and the leaks and the pests. You're going to hear in a couple of minutes from two tenants who lived in these properties, but I want to tell you the stories of a few others. There was a tenant at Fontana Village Apartments. He told Westminster when he moved in that his kitchen window was broken. More than 17 months later, despite the fact that they made repeated complaints that the window was not fixed, 17 months later, his daughter cut her hand on the window, and at that point, the maintenance technician at Westminster noted that the window needed to be replaced ASAP. 17 months later, a tenant at Highland Village notified Westminster 20 times over 20 months that her bathroom was leaking through her kitchen ceiling. A tenant at Princeton Estates complained 9 times about black mold in her apartment. Maintenance technician testified at the hearing on this matter that the staff at Princeton Estates were trained just to paint over the mold, not trying to fix the cause. Another tenant at Princeton Estates had a bathroom ceiling that leaked for 10 months, even though he asked Westminster to fix it 16 times. A tenant at Carroll Park Apartments lost all of her belongings because of repeated flooding in her ground floor apartment after Westminster finally accommodated her request to move. She was provided an apartment at the Commons, another one of these developments, Commons at White Marsh. She experienced constant leaks, walls covered with black mold, and all of this was going on while she was getting chemotherapy for cancer. Others reported having their clothing, personal items destroyed by rodents urinating on them. At the Carriage Hill Apartments, pipes kept bursting in the laundry rooms. and I think there's an email in your packet about this as well. The pipes burst in the laundry rooms and caused floods in the apartments. The reason was Westminster didn't insulate the pipes and refused to repair them. They instructed the tenants, though, not to use their washing machines in the winter when it was cold, and to turn on their dryers and leave the doors open to keep the temperature high enough so that the pipes wouldn't freeze. And by the way, Westminster was not paying for the electricity. These are a few of thousands of examples of mistreatment suffered by tenants at the hands of Westminster. Westminster, by the way, is not alone. We are investigating a number of other landlords that have engaged in similar conduct. The settlement in this case is one in which, first of all, Westminster is going to pay $3,250,000 as a penalty. In addition, they were required to provide restitution to all of the tenants that they mistreated. They will pay back the illegal fees that they charged. They will pay claims from tenants who were damaged by their shoddy maintenance. The first $800,000 that they pay in restitution will be taken out of the $3,250,000. There is no cap, however, on the amount of restitution that they must pay. So they get a credit for $800,000 if they pay that in restitution. There'll be a claims process for the tenants. There'll be a third party who determines liability and damages, one that Westminster will propose to our Consumer Protection Division, and we will either reject or accept the person that they propose. There's injunctive relief as well. Westminster must not charge any more illegal fees, and it must return all the amounts owed to consumers. They must maintain required licenses. While all this was going on, Westminster management, which was collecting the so-called debts, didn't have a debt collection license. There were two properties in Baltimore City that did not have dwelling licenses that are required for a landlord to charge rent in Baltimore City. The work here was long, it was difficult, and I want to thank our lawyers who worked on this case. I want to say thanks to Leah Tulin, who is no longer with our office, but still doing great things. I want to say thanks to Phil Zipperman. He's the Deputy Chief of our Consumer Division. Thanks to Jessica Kaufman, to Kira Wellborn, and to Nikki McCormley. They're all sitting here. And I'm going to introduce two of the tenants here, but first, Phil, why don't you come up and why don't you walk folks through the pictures of tenant 1 and tenant 2.
So during the trial of this case, we tried to put on photographic evidence that were provided to us by consumers and video evidence, and we've just given you examples of three of them. Tenant number 1 was a gentleman that moved into an apartment at the Charles Mount Apartment Homes, and the very first night of his tenancy, his ceiling collapsed in his kitchen, and he testified at the trial that he kept calling the maintenance staff to try and get it fixed. Was never successful, and eventually he watched a video and made the repairs himself. Tenant number 2 was a witness that also had problems that were very typical of the witness pool, and that there were problems with both mice and cockroach infestations. She also had leaks. This was a hole that she had difficulty getting repaired that was in her child's room. These are a little bit difficult to tell, but this is her toilet, and those are the mushrooms that were growing next to her toilet as a result of the leaking. And so these were just photographs that were representative of the conditions that tenant number 2 lived in. The third panel is Ms. Dixon. I don't know, Ms. Dixon.
We'll let her.
Yeah, you'll meet Ms. Dixon in a minute, but these are photos that showed conditions that Ms. Dixon had to live under over about a 4-year period, and so she can explain this herself.
That's great. And so, why don't we start with Tiffany Dixon, and then we'll hear from Glenn Phillips. Come on up.
Thank you. If I may, I'd just like to talk a little loud.
You want to take the mic?
Yes.
Is it possible for you to stay behind there? Because we need this in.
Okay.
At the
Yeah,
podium.
yeah, they need the
Okay.
mics. Why don't you start there on that?
So if I may just direct you to the pictures to the furthest right. So
I'll be Vanna White here.
Thank you. The top left picture is actually after we complained a leak that was found coming from the exit of our kitchen area into our small dining room area. After multiple attempts, they came to our home repeatedly and attempted to blame our dog urinating on the floor. So in an effort to prove that that was not actually occurring, they taped over the floor and duct taped over this black sheet to prove, in fact, that our dog was not urinating on it. And despite multiple attempts, they just kept band-aiding it until actually the nearby wall started collapsing and you can see mold within it. Finally, it was only after intervention with the code enforcement that they intervened, and they were deemed to have to replace our kitchen tiling that had buckled, our carpeting, and even that was met with a lot of resistance. They were, I believe, given 30 days to adhere to the violations, and they waited until the absolute last minute, the week of Christmas, till I came home, and a majority of our items were out of the home, and our house was in an uproar. To the right, you can see some of the kitchen buckling in that same area. This is the outer parts of our small dining room to show how extensive the leak was. They finally figured out that the leak was resulting from our neighboring townhome. There was a large hole underneath of their sink, and so every time they washed dishes, and that's why it was intermittent, it was actually leaking through the walls and coming into our home. We had a lot of health issues. My husband and our youngest son were at patient first pretty frequently for recurring bronchitis. After researching and trying to fend for ourselves without much help from the community, I realized something was really wrong. And after opening the vents, we could clearly see that the unit that we resided in was full of mold throughout the HVAC system, which resulted in our youngest son being diagnosed with allergy-induced asthma, which he still has today. One of the most traumatic events actually happened on my birthday in 2013. I was making dinner for our family, and we were having issues with our stove. I had had enough of all the frequent communication and the lack of response. So out of curiosity, I grabbed a flashlight and I tried to look into our oven. I couldn't see much, but I saw fluffs. So I took our camera to get a better picture because it was too dark. And only after seeing the image on our camera, I realized these fluffs were dead mice that were melted into our oven that I had fed our family with for 4 years. This again was other pictures of mold. We were a young family. It was myself, my husband, and our 2 young children. We were both hardworking parents. It was my first time out of my parents' home. I didn't really understand what could be done, what I could have done differently. I expected to receive services that we paid for, to be able to provide, at the very least for our kids, a safe and healthy home. And as a mom, I feel like with Westminster I failed. And I just hope and pray that this can help other people that weren't as lucky as us, as blessed as us, to have gotten out. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to hear from Glenn Phillips.
Hey, everyone, I'm going to probably keep it a little short.
I moved in to Fontana Village in Rosedale in October 2014. When I first moved in, I was really excited. I've been working 3 jobs to get this place. I finally saw the place and they informed me that things that were wrong with it and things that weren't fixed would be corrected by the time I moved in. They weren't. It took them a week to make repairs that they were supposed to make. And even after that, I still moved in and things weren't completed. I asked them to repair certain things and they said they did. But a month after I moved in, my kitchen walls started to flood, like water started to pour out of my kitchen wall and fill my kitchen in my living room area to the point where it was like a small pond in my living room in my kitchen. And that went on for like off and on over months to the point where I complained about my carpet being soggy in my living room. They finally fixed the carpet, but their way of fixing it was to rip up the top layer, and they left the bottom layer, which seemed fishy to me because it was like covered in black mold on the bottom layer, and the part of my wall where the carpet was rotting away. And so I said to the people that were doing the work, I said, I don't think you're supposed to leave that there. I think you're supposed to replace all of it. And he informed me that that was all that they had paid for, and that I would have to complain to them. And to kind of wrap that up, that continued all the way up until I moved out, like almost like clockwork, to the point where the maintenance man knew me by heart, like, and they automatically knew when they came to my house. They came with the water sludger and all of that stuff. So it was really kind of stressful. And for me, I also struggled with mice issues. The mice would come out, watch TV with me. Like my dog is just looking at them. Like it was a lot of craziness with that. I had a snake that was living underneath of my stove. At one point, I had gas leaking from my stove, and I had called the fire department, or the maintenance man had called the fire department, and the maintenance man informed me that my best way to get my stove replaced would be to continue to call the fire department so that they would force them to replace my stove. So it was just weird kind of situations like that. Threats about, I didn't even know that was a thing, but I would constantly get threats about being evicted and have to pay money ahead of time. And then I would call the courthouse and they wouldn't know anything about it. And so I didn't know that there was things going on with that until I found out about this case. And I spoke with the state's attorney and Kira, and they informed me about all the stuff that had been going on as a whole. So I'm really happy that somebody paid attention to it, and it wasn't just something that got swept under the rug like normally happens. And so I kind of appreciate everything you guys did. And, thank you for listening to us also.
Thank you. So, any questions?
Can you
Yes.
talk about the claims process for?
Yeah. So we have claims forms. Westminster is required under the agreement to notify all of the tenants from whom they received illegal fees, to whom they owe money, and who suffered from poor maintenance. So they'll notify the folks, provide claim forms. It'll be up on our website as well, and people can make claims. And as I said, there'll be a third-party administrator who will determine whether the money is owed and will assess damages, require Westminster to pay the money to the tenants. And that's uncapped. I mean, they get a credit of $800,000 out of the $3.25 million, but if it goes to $1.8 million, if it goes to $2.8 million, whatever it is, they'll pay all the tenant claims. Yes?
How were you able to sort of bring them to a settlement? I know early on they were ridiculing this whole case as political and whatnot, but here we are with a pretty hefty fine and the restitution. Was it basically the administrative law judge ruling that made it a done deal, or did you have to work beyond that to get them to actually be here?
Well, the administrative law judge's ruling was a good one. We thought it did not go far enough, but it was a good one, and their potential liability was significant. I guess over the course of the 3 years that this has been in litigation, and I don't know whether it was a year or two that we conducted the investigation, but over the course of that period, I think it became, I can't speak for them, but it became very clear that they had done wrong and that we were not going to let them off the hook. And that's ultimately what led to the settlement. Yes?
Mr. Attorney General, will the residents be compensated for damages being related for their health issues or if they were hospitalized?
Well, I think potentially yes, but it's going to be up to the claims
Master.
the master, that's essentially a special master who will determine how much they're entitled to. Yes.
Sophie with the Baltimore Banner. I asked Westminster for a comment on all of this, and they said they were pleased to have settled the litigation without an admission of liability or wrongdoing. I wonder if you consider this to be that admission, or how you would respond to that statement.
Well, sure. You don't pay $3,250,000 if you're not liable. The administrative law judge found that they were liable. So they may not have formally signed a piece of paper saying we did it, but they did it. Yes.
Can I ask a question about the Adnan Syed case? I have to ask, do you stand by the integrity of the conviction?
Look, today is about Westminster, and we'll have more to say about Adnan at a future time.
Any other questions? Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks a lot.